Does this thing still work? Are we still able to record on this thing? What's going on, guys? Welcome. After a long awaited 3-year hiatus, welcome back to another episode of the Deep Freeze. Let's get a round of applause. Now, this podcast, this first episode is going to be, I guess, basically, just an update. It's not going to be a super long ramble. I just want this to be an update as to where I've been at, what's been going on, and kind of my plans for this podcast going forward, as well as some announcements. And to be honest, just to get back in the podcasting seat, to be back in the host chair for the first time in like 3 years. Before we get into it, I got to give a huge shout out to whoever has been listening to my podcasts in the last 2 months. I've had something like 18 or 20 views in the last couple months here, which is pretty wild to me. Somebody's been going back through my logbook of episodes, all 8 of them, and listened to all of them. And whoever that is, you're a real one. Thank you very much for that. For those of you that are just tuning in to the podcast, this is the first one we're doing with a video camera. We're going to try doing this as a video podcast as well. So we'll see how this one goes, but for the time being, we'll obviously do the podcast and then do the video as we can get into it. So, hi YouTube. Man, it feels good to be finally getting back to this, to be getting back into the Deep Freeze. That is this podcast name after all. I am your host, as always, Tanner Friesen. Welcome back. Welcome here. It kind of feels, it feels a little surreal to be finally in a place where I can do this again. Lots has changed over the last number of years. So before you get too far into this podcast, I do want to say, go back through and listen to my last episode, as some of that, I believe it was called Sadistic Tims. Try and listen to that podcast if you can. At least the first 10 or so minutes, 15 minutes maybe. It'll give you a big it'll let you in on some more things that have happened. No, that's not true. It'll give you more backstory as to what has happened in my life. So, without further ado, I guess let's get into what's been keeping me busy. So, man, where do I start? So we'll start from the beginning, from the last episode. I did go back through and listen to it. My girlfriend that I was living with in St. Anne at the time has become my wife. We have been married now we're in our second year of marriage. We were married in the summer of 2021. It was a beautiful day. Very blessed, very fortunate to have my wife, who has quite honestly pushed me to get back into this and to do what I love, which is creating content, is doing a podcast, doing YouTube, which if anyone has followed along, I did dabble in the YouTubes for a little while. The videos have kind of since stopped, and I'll get into why on that side of it as well. But for the most part, I'm going to adjust my mic here. Sorry if that sounds terrible. So we got married in summer of 2021. I've been really enjoying that. It's been fun to become a husband and kind of live the dream with my wife. Um, in the fall of 2022, we lost my mom to a courageous battle with cancer. That was tough. Something not was tough, is tough. Something that we we deal with. Sorry, just, turn that phone off. Silence, that you guys don't hear it. Yeah, tough. You know, some days are obviously better than others. I don't want to get too deep into that because I do want to save that for a podcast. I think that's an important topic to go on and to talk about. So that happened in the fall of 2022, and in the summer. Well, I guess let me back up. In the summer of 2022, me and my wife bought our first house, so that's been cool to be homeowners. It sucks at times when things break because you can't just call a landlord, but it's fun nonetheless. We've done a lot of renovations to our house, and a lot of work has gone into it. But we're still, there's always anybody who has bought a house, an older house, knows the struggle in there's always more work. So I guess that's fun. So that happened in the summer of 2022. Lost my mom in the fall of 2022, and now in the summer of 2023, we welcomed our first child into the world, a beautiful baby boy. And man, that has been the coolest thing. Between becoming a husband and becoming a father, those are the two best things I've ever done in my life. And I don't know if I'll ever top it. It's been the coolest thing to watch my boy grow up and to learn things. He's at the stage where he's so curious with the world, and just learn, whether it's learning his hands, learning his feet, learning to roll, and watch him kind of roly-poly around the house. Man, it's something special, and I'm so very fortunate to be able to have that, to be a part of it. There's a lot of people in this world that can't, and I empathize with them wholly. It's got to be a hard thing wanting something so bad and not being able to have it, or having some bad luck with it maybe. Again, I don't want to go too into depth on all of this. I do want to save some of these for podcast episodes and future episodes coming up, as a way to not only share with you guys, but also just to be consistent. If I have consistent, or if I have a lot of things to talk about, then we can break them up into episodes and at least be consistent with having these episodes come out. I'm going to try. I know I just said it there. I'm really going to work on saying That's one thing my mom told me a lot of. I talk like a hockey player that's giving an interview, so I'm going to try to not say that. It might take a minute. My brain functions on dial-up, and my mouth functions on 5G, fastest Wi-Fi ever invented. So it takes a minute for my brain to catch up to my mouth sometimes. So I'll apologize for that now. But essentially, yeah, that's kind of what's gone on in my life over the last 3 years from my last episode. One thing especially since having my boy, I've realized how much I've actually missed podcasting and missed, creating content and essentially just sitting here talking to you guys. I know it sounds like a very millennial thing to say, but I thoroughly enjoy doing it. I thoroughly enjoy getting the time to sit down and create these episodes. And yeah, maybe the editing of it sometimes gets a little bit monotonous and tough to do and frustrating, tough to find the time to do even. But creating the content has got to be one of my most favorite things in the world. So yeah, I'm just excited to be back recording podcasts and hopefully, getting into the YouTube and making content again. I really, really thoroughly enjoyed it. So on that note, just with this podcast, The Deep Freeze, obviously, like I said, I want to be as intentional as I can with being I want to keep this as something I'm consistent doing. I don't know if it'll be, an episode every week or if it's going to be an episode every other week. Maybe that's something I start with, is just doing one bi-weekly and then going from there. If it picks up, then I can do it every week. But maybe I'll just start doing something bi-weekly to I said it again. Man, I got to get better at not saying. That is an issue. That is a real problem in my life. Why do I sound like a hockey player giving an interview? Jeez Louise. So, yeah. We'll start with bi-weekly and then kind of go from there as time becomes, as I get, back into this chair and get a little comfy in this chair, back being a host and doing the editing and doing this podcast. There it is again. Dude. Clip that shit. So talking about this podcast, I went back through and listened to a few of the old Deep Freeze episodes, and one thing I don't want this podcast to become is so Theo Von-esque. For those of you that have been with the podcast for a while, I maybe should apologize. I want this podcast to be authentically me. My thoughts, my feelings, how things are going when they're going good, how things are going when they're not going good, the achievements in life, stuff like that. And I don't want to be influenced by any noise outside of who I am regarding this podcast. The last episodes, it's almost embarrassing how much I was trying to sound like Theo Von. Now, don't get me wrong, like I still have witty remarks. I don't want this to be just an emo podcast, but I want to keep the witty remarks and my sense of humor in it. But the key there is I want it to be my sense of humor and my jokes and not try and be someone that I'm not, because I'm not Theo Von. I don't need to talk like him. I don't need to be him. So I'm sorry to anyone that's going to listen to this that's why they stuck around. Sorry, but it won't be like that going forward necessarily. It won't be the same format per se. So, tough, I guess. Sorry. It's close to an apology as you'll get out of me. But I'm just excited that I have the chance to do this again. That's really what it comes down to. And I know I've said it a bunch in this podcast, and I'll keep saying it. I'm thrilled to be able to do this again and sit here with you guys and talk and be able to share my life with you guys. But damn it, does that sound... It sounds like a cry for help. Good grief. I swear I'm doing okay, I swear I'm doing okay. Doing fine. Doing good. So, on another note, I do want to announce this, I guess now. There it is again. Somebody let me know what's the appropriate amount of ums that I can put in a podcast without sounding like an absolute D-bag. Because that's kind of how I feel when I'm saying like this. Like, good grief, kid. Figure it out. Tighten it up, as Mr. Vaughn would say. So the podcast. Not only will I be doing this one, the deep freeze, I am super excited to let you guys know that I will be starting another one. This one with a good friend of mine, Brad. We met through work a year and a bit ago, I guess. We've clicked. We've talked about doing a podcast for quite some time now, and it's finally happening. This podcast is going to be called The Farming Feud. So right there off the title, you know that it's going to be an agricultural-based podcast. Excuse me. With a Canadian, a South African that grew up on either sides of the world, but that are both grossly passionate about agriculture, the fields they're in, and the state of not only Canadian agriculture, but Manitoba agriculture as we see it. We have recorded, at the time of this recording, we have recorded a couple episodes. We have some backlogged. We are shooting for, I believe, a end of February, early March release. And so stay tuned for that. It's going to be a really good podcast. The few episodes we have recorded are, they're some of my favorite. It's essentially a couple guys that like hanging out, talking shit, and talking about farming, and talking shit to each other. Because I do tend to give Brad a hard time about his growing up, which maybe I should be nicer to him. Canadians are supposed to be nice, right? So I am super excited for that podcast. For anyone wondering, I don't think I've ever covered it in a podcast. Maybe I have. I don't think I have. For anyone wondering, the Flatlands Field and Fowl podcast, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not a part of it. Me and Dwayne had a very amicable split on that. Life got busy. You know, that can be his part of the story to tell. But as far as I'm concerned, you know, that podcast had a life cycle. Maybe we'll come back to it one day. Who knows? As for right now, you know, my focus is the deep freeze and the farming feud, and that's kind of where my focus is. So, not kind of, that is where my focus is. I repeat myself. I need to stop doing that too. This is going to be a mess of a podcast for anyone listening. So, that's good. Good first one back, Tanner. But yeah, you know, maybe I'll cover that. I'm going to save that for another episode. The whole Flatlands Field and Fowl thing. Not that it was bad. Like there wasn't. As far as I'm concerned, there's no hard feelings on what happened. Nothing major happened. We both got busy. Life got busy, and you know, it was time to make a decision. We're both pursuing careers. We're both growing families. You know, that's just, unfortunately for that podcast, that was kind of the way that it went. So, who knows? Who knows what the future holds, I guess, is the end of that statement. Who knows? It could pick back up. It might never. I hope that it does. It was a fun time, and it was something that we both enjoyed doing. It just got to be a lot of work, much like this thing did at the point of my life. So we'll see. We will see what the future holds. Is there anything else? Anything else I want to talk to you guys about? Welcome back. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be back. This is cool. I cannot wait to dive into some more episodes. Why do I sound like I'm from Wisconsin? Yeah, excited to be here. Excited to be back in the chair. Sorry this podcast was a mess. Oh, man, I've had too much coffee today, I think. Shout out my wife for bringing me a coffee, though. Pretty clutch. Pretty clutch on her part. So sorry this podcast was all over the place. I hope this is just a one-off. Next time I'll come prepared with a little bit better notes. I just wanted to get this one rocked off. Like I said, it'd been on my heart and been on my brain for quite a while, and been meaning to make time to do it. But it's one of those things for me that if I don't make time to do it, it just goes to the back burner. And I mean, I think that's pretty obvious with the 3-year hiatus. So that's that. Welcome back. Stay tuned for more. Share, like, subscribe, all that fun podcast jargon. We will see you on the next one.